So, what does it take to truly break a cycle?
I think the biggest piece to start is questioning the truths you've believed in.
What leads you to that question? Because there's got to be something that prompts that question, right?
Right. The question is everything I'm doing with my life, what I'm investing my time in, my money, my thoughts on a daily basis, is it the best system that's going to lead to a life of fulfillment and purpose? I mean, you got to think about it. How many times have I caught myself on a daily, weekly, monthly, even stacking up to years, where I'm consistently allowing my thought life to be on things that are stressful, expectations of what other people have for me, fear of not being enough, all of those things. And a lot of times, I would probably say all of the time, when I've actually broken down and asked, why am I spending so much thought time on those things? It's usually based on fear. Fear of not making it, fear of not taking care of my responsibilities, fear of not measuring up to society's expectations of how successful I should be. A big one is fear of what my parents and my wife's parents think about how good I'm taking care of my family. And when I asked why, it changed my perspective of saying, okay, why have I given so much value to what others think? How come I haven't stopped to ask a lot more of what are my expectations of what I want my family, my career, and the end of my life to look at?
If you're looking for other people's validation of your performance, it's never going to add up, because they hold themselves accountable differently than you do.
Not only that, their expectations are different. Yeah, well, no, but they do hold themselves accountable differently, and their expectations are different. And so I could be trying to succeed in an expectation that has nothing to do with who I was created to be. That's where the drain comes in, of when you're fighting so hard to be successful at something that doesn't fill your cup. That's where burnout comes in. And that's where people get fed up with when they're in 20 years into a career and they realize that they've only been doing it to meet the expectations of other people. There's zero purpose in that. And when you find yourself in a place in life where you don't have something bigger than yourself to believe in and why you operate each day, it is hard to wake up and go out and do that, especially to do it with excellence, to do it at a high rate of success, because you're not bought in yourself.
You have to want to do it, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the point about saying, I am going to go on a journey to understand me, believe in me, create habits in my life that help me feel comfortable in my own skin. And then when I understand what I truly want by the end of my life, I can now begin setting up directions, just like plugging in coordinates to drive from here to Dallas into GPS, Google Maps, Apple Maps, whatever it is. When I know the destination, I can begin plugging in and start getting, hey, at this point in your life, 12 months down the road, you need to take a right. In 6 months, after doing X, Y, and Z, you'll be ready to take a left, and you'll travel X amount of miles down the road on that path as you're growing to get to the next stop. And it becomes very intentional and clear cut when we are very clear about where we want to be in the end. But a lot of people don't like thinking about the end.
Right.
Facing your own mortality, especially if you're not willing to face the things necessary to reach an epic ending in your life, why would you want to think about the end? You're not even confronting the day-to-day stuff that's for sure holding you back to becoming that epic version of yourself that God created in order to reach that destination.
It connects to the patterns that we talked about earlier. It's so easy to get stuck back in those.
Yeah.
And I think, so for example, somebody that's just left a bad relationship can struggle in a new relationship by falling back into the old patterns, even though they can say, oh, like this last relationship was so bad. It was, they treated me bad. They did this. But going into a new relationship, it's very easy to fall back into those same habits that you were in that bad relationship. And because in your mind, you think of when you think back to that bad relationship, you think, oh, that I didn't enjoy that. That wasn't comfortable for me. But you actually end up finding comfort in those habits and those responses and those expectations. So that it's really hard for people to look at that and say that they're actually comfortable living in those bad routines and those bad habits, but that's what it is. You can get comfortable in those bad cycles. And it is uncomfortable to break those.
Yes.
That was, I just came to that realization 2 months ago. I was talking to one of my mentors and another business owner, but I was wrestling with that very thing of just being uncomfortable for so long. I feel like I've had to be, every day is a battle. Every day I'm having to try something new, challenge myself in a different way, and it's exhausting. But the conversation was, when it was really that conversation of when do I get to the part where like everything's fine, and their answer was, oh, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't. You have to stay hungry. Like you have to, if you want to keep learning, you're asking to be constantly uncomfortable because you're constantly challenging your ideas. It's just because I carry it well doesn't mean it's not heavy.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately, like, that's something that we've talked about too, is it's how you carry it. Mm-hmm. Christ calls us to carry our cross every day. And that doesn't mean to complain about it. That doesn't mean to, it means how can you carry your cross and still love others, still be kind to others. Switching topics a little bit, I had this thought this week. How often do you think people confuse their next chapter with just a repetition of the same cycle they've been stuck in for years?
A lot of people will change their circumstances and feel like they're moving on to the next place. But if they're not addressing the things internally, they're going to repeat the same cycle in a different spot.
Changing your environment doesn't change the habit.
It's from the inside out. And you talked about how, yes, it is hard. It is a cost to consistently be challenging our truths, holding ourselves accountable, learning and growing. But there's a cost to staying comfortable and staying in a safe, what you think is a safe place, just because it's easy and comfortable. There's a cost either way. So there's a cost to growing and developing and having to develop that endurance to be able to handle the constant growth and change, but being comfortable, even though you don't have to feel like you're carrying as much on a day-to-day basis. The amount of confrontation, being confronted with the truth as the years go by of how much you're missing out on because you refuse to get out of your comfort zone, that cost will keep growing and grow. It's almost like an investment account. It grows exponentially and multiplies. The regret and the realization of, since I stayed comfortable, I missed out on all the opportunities to be the version of myself I needed to be for my family, for my spouse, for my coworkers. I never developed the courage to speak up when my coworker was going through that circumstance in their life, and they opened and shared to me, but I didn't have the boldness to walk alongside them and speak life into them. I felt like I was too busy, or I wasn't selfless enough to dive in because I didn't develop those skills. There's a cost either way.
Yeah.
And I would much rather pay the cost of having to change and grow on a day-to-day basis. And like you said, somewhat feel like I'm always a rookie at everything I'm doing because I'm going into new areas of my life. But I know they said it never gets to a point where you feel like everything's okay. But there is a certain aspect of the longer you do it, you almost become efficient and comfortable in handling adversity that it no longer feels as heavy.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It doesn't get lighter, you just get stronger.
Yep, you get stronger. But
Yeah.
that's the reward of paying that price. And, there's a simple quote, and it's 100% true. Changing things grow, and growing things change. And so if you want to see growth, you've got to make changes.
Yeah.
If you don't make changes, don't expect growth.
Yeah. No, that's so good. I feel like this topic specifically is hitting me really hard just because, like we talked about before we started rolling, like I feel like in the past 2 weeks, I've really acknowledged the cycle I'm stepping out of, the cycle I'm breaking, and stepping into this new, I hope it's not another cycle, but you know what I mean? It's stepping out of that old cycle and thinking about what does it take to break it. Man, it takes...
Yeah, what's a habit that has helped you make this jump into the next cycle or this next place in your life?
So like what you said, everything you said, for me, I also needed those positive influences in my life to healthily compare myself to.
Yeah.
So when I was single, I mean, I would go to you and I would say, Jeremy's a good father. Like, what are some traits you have? I would ask you questions about that. Like, I would look at how you raise your kids. I would look at how other people other fathers I respect, I would see how they raise their kids. I would look at even mothers, what makes a good mother. And luckily, the Lord has placed 4 ladies in my life who I would call my spiritual mothers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've especially it's so crazy, man. It's so crazy. In the moment that all fell apart, all these women stepped up for me without even prompting. I know God had his hand in that, just the way they came into my life so lovingly, aggressively.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. I like it.
But breaking the cycle, man, it's every day's a battle. It feels like constant imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. It feels like constantly having to check myself, having to constantly check my perspectives, because you are in that. Rewiring your brain is so difficult, because when you start rewiring your brain, you start letting go of those old habits. But then for me, I explained it to my wife that it literally felt like I was suspended. Like I was kind of floating in this abstract space of now I don't know what to do. Because I had been doing this thing for so long to either cope or to mask this insecurity. And now that I've let go of it, now what do I do? And that's where I've leaned on her, or leaned on my mentors, or leaned on you to point me in the right direction, or just to give me some framework to work with. So acceptance and humility. For me, I had to have those positive influences in my life, seeking wisdom from those positive influences. And then also remembering, man, for me, honestly, it was just being nice to myself. I really just had to,
same here.
Be nice to myself, because ultimately what it was I was being so mean to myself because of how I was conditioned to look at myself throughout my upbringing. I'm not saying my parents didn't love me. I know my parents loved me. There was a lot of other things that clouded that for me, though. So
which is usually clouded for them as well, and that's how that gets passed on. Right.
Now stepping into that, what it takes to break that is complete trust, actually. And that's very difficult. The more I take my hands off the situation, the better everything has become. But we have that, we want to control the situation, we want to control it, but I'm telling you, the more I've literally just put my hands up, the better everything has gotten. And that's been so hard when I've had a firm grasp on every aspect of my life for so long, you know what I mean? So really
had a firm grasp.
Right.
Like we think we have that control.
Thank you for clarifying. No, that's
100%. I mean, I was in the same boat. Yeah.
And then some other like little practical things. Again, it's listening to those podcasts, like I've mentioned before, listening to the podcast where they talk about this feeling is normal, keep going. Having those conversations to say, I may not relate to that yet, but as soon as I get there, I'll know to keep going.
Yeah.
Because those moments did come. Those moments have come where it didn't feel right. But I know even Theo Vaughn talking about every day's a battle, but you have to keep going.
Yeah.
That's all I need, you
Yeah.
know? So there's some practical things I do.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that you mentioned, or that you didn't directly mention it, but is what we both have talked about and we are experiencing as a benefit in our life, it's consistency.
Yes.
We're consistently trying the things we know that are going to help us grow as individuals.
Yep.
And on the days you don't feel like it, on the days you may not even believe it, like you said about being nice to yourself and loving yourself, being consistent at saying, hey, I don't even believe this about myself right now, but I know I'm wrong in thinking that about myself because of what God says. So even though I don't feel like it right now, I'm going to speak affirmations over myself, acknowledging God's handiwork. It can be so easy for us to compliment and believe great things about other people, and so hard to compliment and believe great things about ourselves because we know every depth and inch of our hearts, past experiences, past mistakes, the evil that has come out in our lives and choices and actions and sin. But in spite of those things, I'm going to consistently acknowledge God's handiwork because he's the ultimate source of truth. And the consistency has paid off a ton in our lives. Jocko Willing talks about discipline all the time, you know, and I thought, man, that's great for working out and exercise. And I am passionate about those principles in exercise. I've coached for years and I've seen it played out, you know, in sports and athletics. If you're disciplined, it will grow you and pay off in the long run. But even on the most basic principles of our identity and spiritual aspects in the matter, discipline is key. That's saying it's non-negotiable. I have non-negotiables in my life that when things go crazy, I'm not going to fall back into the things that got me stuck in those unhealthy loops. I'm going to sit down and pray again today, because being consistent in my prayer life has just been eye-opening. I've prayed many times in my life and gone through chunks of being consistent in it, but not, you know, others and different things like that. Just consistently praying, even when I don't feel like it, has produced fruit in my life that has been so beneficial. And it's that discipline of saying, I don't care what's going on today. I might have missed it this morning, but before I go to bed tonight, I am checking off my prayer time and I'm going to spend time with the Lord. That discipline and having non-negotiables about the most important things in my life have just paid dividends. So practically, just consistently showing up for yourself and what matters most in your life will produce fulfillment that nothing else can.
Can you have discipline without a vision?
I mean, how can you? Just like we talked about plugging in a destination in Google Maps. How can you have consistent directions if you don't know where you're going?
I think that's the difference between being mean to yourself and like self-accountability. If you're calling it discipline but you don't have a goal, you're just beating yourself up for no reason.
Yep.
So,
because what are you even aiming at?
Exactly.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I'm with you. I don't think discipline can exist, you know, in the truest form without vision.
So we've been talking about the difference between our vision and God's vision. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about discipline exist without vision, whose vision are we looking at? What does that mean? If I have the vision that I want to be healthy by the time I'm 60, that means I got to start working out, right? So I have that vision. So like there's that. But how does that look in the kingdom mindset?
So I wholeheartedly believe that, you know, ultimately God will intervene or give us specific directions. But I think he's impressed stuff on our hearts from birth. You know, just like our fingerprints are different and they're unique to everybody. Everybody has their own unique talents and gifts, things that make them feel alive. And I believe as long as you are pursuing those things and you're doing it in a way that honors the Lord with character and integrity, and you're doing it in a way that recognizes the greatness of his creation in yourself, you can pursue those things as long as they're not directly against what he says in the Bible. You know what I mean? If you're very passionate about working out and exercising and doing, I mean, if you want to become a personal trainer, or if you want to create an entire channel on social media that inspires and helps others to pursue their fitness goals, I believe God's put that desire, that talent, and that ability in you from birth, and you can use that to honor the kingdom and to advance the kingdom. It's, once again, starting from a place that says, God, no matter what it is, I want to do it in a place that, or I want to come from a place that every action, every thought, every word honors you everywhere I go. And no matter what I'm doing, I want it to bring you praise and glory.
Yeah.
And when we get from that place where we're operating from that foundation, I mean, as long as you're not selling drugs or, you know, into human trafficking, you know, illegal stuff, of course, that once again goes directly against God.
Yeah, 100%.
And his characteristics, then that's the point. Like, forget what anybody else says. If it's on your heart that much and you're that passionate about it, and you can do it to the glory of God, start now. Believe in yourself, take a bet on yourself, and start now.
And in my experience, by pursuing that, the things I needed to be confronted with were placed right in front of me. I didn't have to go search for it. They just presented themselves.
Explain that.
Okay, so I was in a relationship, and then as soon as I turned my heart back to the Lord, all these questions just came up in my head, and I fought off a lot of these questions because I probably knew what the answer was going to be.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But ultimately it led to her asking me those, like, a question that it was like, well, now I just have to ask this. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Or
You were trying to run from it, but you couldn't because
Yes.
of what you were pursuing
yes.
with the Lord. Yeah.
And I do believe, I mean, I see that as God playing a role in that, which also plays into the law of attraction like we talked about, because I was focused on these things. I knew these things, so those things gravitated towards me.
Yeah.
That's what I mean whenever I say I was confronted with those things, whether I realized it or not.
Yeah.
And I think that was the best thing that entrepreneurship gave me, because especially that first year starting off, you know, you go out, you're putting yourself on the stage, you're saying, this is what I got to offer the world, come look at me, you know. But me being up on that stage, I realized how much work I had to do. So like I was just confronted with, okay, you're faking to all these people, you're only searching after money, you're seeking for yourself. I was confronted with all those things immediately. So that first year for me was rough because it showed me it wasn't my product that I had to sell. My product was a byproduct of who I was as a person.
That's good, yeah.
So if I was a mediocre person, my product suffered that much more.
Yeah, if you're running from the accountability needed to be the version of yourself to give an excellent product to somebody, your product was going to suffer.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody's confronted with those things, but it's whether you choose to face them or not. So if you've followed along with us earlier in the week, you've gone through parts 1 and 2. This is the wrap up for part 3. We've just gone over some practical ways that we can break the unhealthy loops that we find ourselves in, those cycles that we've just done out of comfort and habit. And we hope that you found some value in the practical ways that we have used ourselves to break those cycles. And if you have some things in your life that we didn't talk about on the video, would you please put those in the comments for practical ways that you have found value in breaking those cycles that we can learn from you guys as well, and maybe even put some of those practices in our own life. So Thank you for watching part 3. We hope you guys enjoyed it.
Money.
Okay.